Hello, everyone, and welcome to Right Wing Rising. Please be sure to like this video down below before you are finished watching, and subscribe to the channel if you are new. So in today's installment of my 240 to Win series, we're going to be talking about the state of Rhode Island. It has long been a reliably blue state, but I think it would be interesting to take a brief look at the state, the margins in recent elections, predictions and analysis for the elections taking place there this year, and looking at the possible trends pointing to the political future of the state. To do that, we have to look first at the current political landscape in the state, one which Democrats heavily dominate. You will be hard-pressed to find any high-ranking officials in the political system of the state that are Republican. One of the two U.S. Senate seats is up for election this fall. The incumbent Democrat, Sheldon Whitehouse, is running for a fourth term after winning in 2012 by 30 points and in 2018 by 23 points, which I bring up because it's interesting that his margin of victory got 7 points smaller from a presidential year in 2012 to a midterm year in 2018 where Democrats swept the country. You think he would dominate even more in this reliably Democrat state, but Republicans actually improved in the race against him, which is interesting. As for this time around, there has been only one poll of this race, and it came out in early September, showing Whitehouse only barely clearing 50%, leading his Republican challenger 51 to 33. This 18-point lead is still solid, obviously, but the fact that an incumbent Democrat in a reliably Democrat state is only barely over 50% in a poll is pretty interesting and eyebrow-raising. And also, if the polling margin holds up on election night, this is a much smaller win than he is used to having, and it would be the second straight election for Whitehouse that his margin of victory decreased by at least 5 points. Keep in mind that there are a lot of undecided voters in that poll, so it remains to be seen if the final result actually ends up getting closer by any significant amount compared to his past margins. Considering that a 23-point win from the 2018 midterms is still a massive victory, Republicans getting over 40% in this race against Whitehouse, who has been in power for almost 20 years, would be a pretty significant win for the GOP, especially considering that there has been no Republican representing Rhode Island in the U.S. Senate in the last 20 years, after Sheldon Whitehouse himself broke the Chafee dynasty when he defeated the incumbent one-term senator Lincoln Chafee in 2006, whose father, also the former governor of the state, had held this Senate seat for nearly 25 years before his death in office, to be succeeded by his son. This family holds the distinction of being the only Republicans to be successfully elected at the federal level, especially statewide, in a really long time in Rhode Island. Sure, Republicans won the governorship a lot in the 80s, 90s, and early 2000s, but for the last 20 years, especially at the federal level, Republicans have been politically bankrupt. Of the two House seats in the state, the 2nd Congressional District is more competitive, and it was very competitive in 2022, due to Alan Fung, the former mayor of Cranston, which has the distinction of being Rhode Island's second largest city, part of the Providence metro area, being the GOP nominee in the midterms. He led in all the polls leading up to Election Day and was looking to give Republicans a big pickup, but Republicans dropped the ball on Election Day, failing to win even with the best possible candidate that they could run in this state and in this seat, losing by 7,000 votes and 3.5 points when all the votes were counted, and missing out on their chance to get their first Republican congressman elected in Rhode Island since the early 90s, meaning it's been 30 years since Republican voters from the state have had any representation in the United States House of Representatives. And with Fung's Democrat opponent now being the sitting congressman after having won, and the former popular mayor of Cranston not running this time, there is basically a 0% chance this seat flips with a random Republican as the nominee, when they couldn't get it done with a well-known and well-liked Republican in Rhode Island, even though it still might be within 10 points. The only poll of this race did have the Democrat incumbent leading by 14 points, but it also had his vote share as under 50% of the vote, which is pretty bad for an incumbent. But even if it's moderately close, that would only be a moral victory for Republicans after they had a serious chance to capture it last time, and now it's practically out of reach for Republicans under normal circumstances. And the 1st Congressional District is much more blue, voting to the left consistently by 30 points. So Republicans are all out of luck at getting any representation in Congress. To give even more evidence of Democrats' dominance in the state, they have controlled the state Senate for over 60 years, and the state House for over 80 years. To put that into perspective, they have controlled the lower chamber of the state legislature since World War II. That is ridiculous, meaning that the state has really lived for the past 50 years under one-party rule. Most of the population lives in Providence, the greater metro area, and along the shoreline, so most of the legislative districts are concentrated in this general area, that being the eastern side of the state. And given that these places lean heavily Democrat, as coastal and urban areas do in most states, Democrats have a firm grip on the overwhelming amount of seats as a result, hence why they have been able to hold on to power here for such a long time. Their majority in the state Senate is 33-5, and only 2 of the 5 Republican seats are competitive, while 3 or 4 of Democrat seats are within reach to be flipped by the GOP, meaning if Republicans hold their 2 vulnerable seats, they could add members to their ranks by gaining any number of Democrat seats. Democrats hold an equally large majority in the state House, with a 65-9 advantage, with 1 additional seat being represented by an independent. But the GOP also has a chance to expand their ranks here. 4 of their 9 seats are competitive, and Democrats have 5 seats that are competitive to varying degrees, and Republicans, on a good night, have good chances to flip them. And while these potential gains seem as if they would be insignificant, since Democrats would still have large majorities in both chambers, it would be like losing a basketball game 90-50 instead of 100-40 and celebrating that huge loss as some kind of victory because it wasn't bigger, but it would give Republicans their highest percentage of representation in the state legislature in a number of years. And in a deep blue state such as Rhode Island, where Democrats dominate all levels of government, it would be a welcome sign and change of pace for Republicans to actually gain ground for a change. Finally, at the presidential level, in the last 50 years, the state has only voted red once. It only voted for Republicans by 4 points. In fact, not even a single county had voted red at the presidential level in the state for 30 years until Trump came along and flipped Kent County, nearly cracking 40% statewide and only lost by 15, which doesn't seem like that great of a performance, but it was a shockingly surprising result out of nowhere since Republicans hadn't done that well since 1988. They couldn't even get 30% of the vote against Bill Clinton in the 1990s. And Bush got wrecked by Gore in 2000 by 30 points. And even though 4 years later he improved in the state when he won the popular vote in 2004, he still could not perform as well as Trump did in 2016, still losing it to John Kerry by 21 points. And Obama won the state twice by 28 points each time. That's why Trump's improvement was so drastic. Democrats' margin of victory being cut down from 28 points to 14 points in just 4 years is a huge political shift. To showcase that shift even more, Trump carried 14 towns in 2016, whereas Romney only won 3 single towns 4 years prior. So an absolutely huge movement to the right that could not be discounted. Biden was able to flip Kent County back once again into the Democrat column in 2020 and made the state 6 points bluer against Trump, winning by 21. But that was in a year where everything went right for Democrats, and Trump still got over 38% of the vote, and greatly overperformed the polls that said Biden would win Rhode Island by 30 points. Considering that the national popular vote is all but certain to swing back to the right this November, that fact alone should be able to help Trump flip back Kent County into his column and narrow Harris's margin of victory in the Providence metro area. And by those things happening, he could very well be the first Republican since the 1980s to finally get over 40% in the state of Rhode Island, which would be a very positive step forward for the GOP in the state. So it will be an interesting state to pay attention to on election night to see if Trump pulls off another under-the-radar good performance here. While the state is liberal, due to a fairly proportionally large segment of the population being wealthy and college-educated, in addition to finance and healthcare being big sectors of the economy, and the demographics and groups that are employed in those jobs tend to lean predominantly to the left. But manufacturing and agricultural industries also have a sizable footprint in the state, and nearly 75% of its citizens are Christian, the majority of which are Catholic. These groups have moved more to the right in the past few years, some more than others being especially motivated to do so by Trump and his policies. On a good year, 500,000 people vote in the state, which is an advantage for the GOP because it means that they have a smaller vote gap to close in order to win. Republicans could actually see some success in Rhode Island by following Trump's platform and by targeting favorable demographics to get out and vote for them, and to make sure that as many people as possible in those economic and religious groups that would tend to lean Republican are registered to vote. Depending on how things go this year, this New England state could actually become more Republican and more competitive in the not-so-distant future if things keep trending the way they have been over the last decade in the state. But only time will tell what the political future holds for the state of Rhode Island.